So I want to talk about a Packers draft pick from this past weekend. One guy who I think could end up being one of the biggest steals of the draft, and this is cornerback Kalen King. So Kalen King was projected to be a first-round draft pick after the 2022 season. When you look back at lots of the rankings from many of these draft experts after last year's 2023 NFL draft, Kalen King was in the number 15, like 15 to 20 prospect range, meaning he would be drafted in round one. That's what many people thought after the way he played in 2022, which clearly showed how elite his 2022 season was with Penn State. And if you look at his grade per PFF from his 2022 season, it was an 89 grade. He had a 90.6 coverage grade in 2022, which is elite, like an elite type grade, which makes sense why at that time he was expected to be drafted in round one by many draft experts. So it makes you, ask the question, how in the world did someone who was expected to be drafted in the first round drop all the way to round 7? And I think clearly when you look at his 2023 season, it was almost night and day to what happened in 2022. And so clearly most teams in the NFL did not think that he would be able to get back to that 2022 form, because if the 31 other NFL teams that had multiple chances to draft him, including the Packers for the first 6 rounds, none of those teams really had the confidence, I would say, because they didn't draft him, that he could get back and consistently play at that 2022 level. I think it seemed to be a much more risky bet to draft him because of what happened in 2023. And if you look at his 2023 season with Penn State, he had a 60.3 PFF grade. So down from 89 to 60.3. If you look at his coverage grade, 2022, 90.6, 2023, 55.7. So completely different. And now let me read you some stats that continue to show just the difference in his play from 2022 to 2023. And this is an excerpt from a Bill Huber Sports Illustrated article. He has really great stuff on the Packers pretty much daily, so make sure you go check that out. But here is from Bill Huber on King's stats. In 2022, 200 FBS level cornerbacks played at least 318 coverage snaps. According to Pro Football Focus, King ranked 5th in force and completion percentage, 29, 16th in opponent passer rating, 48.9, and 28th in completion percentage, 45.8. In 2023, King ranked 186th in force and completion percentage, which is down from, he was 5th to 186. And then 99th in opponent passer rating, 82.4, and 144th in completion percentage, 61. He didn't allow any touchdowns, but he went from 21 passes defended to 2 and 0 penalties to 4. And so I don't exactly know, what changed in his game. For whatever reason, he went from playing an elite level to playing at a pretty poor level. And so I'm not sure exactly why that happened or how that happened. And there are times where these players, are a little bit volatile in their performance and how they perform from year in and year out. And so the Packers get a guy who at one point was seen to be a first-round talent, struggles in 2023, and so they're able to get him all the way in round 7. And let me share with you a quote here from King himself about this entire situation. This is from Packers Wire, where I got the quote. "Today was honestly," said King with a pause, "I feel like this whole experience definitely was one of the toughest things I've mentally had to endure in my life. But I felt like today was a blessing and curse. Even though I didn't get drafted where I wanted to, I felt like God made the right choice for me. Every decision and everything happens for a reason. I feel like I'm in a place where I'm supposed to be, and I'm happy I got my name called." And that has to be tough to go from being seen as a first-round prospect to then sitting there through that draft, and probably in round 7, he's probably hoping that he gets drafted after thinking he was potentially going to go in round 1 after 2022. I don't think that he probably thought he would go in round 1 after his 2023 season, but I was looking at some different rankings, and some people had him around, rank 100 to 4th roundish grade on him for this draft coming into the draft. And so he probably thought he would at least get drafted maybe around 4 or 5. And so as he continued to drop, I would assume that's very, stressful, where you think you're going to get drafted and maybe as the end is coming, before the Packers decide to come in and draft him, he's probably wondering if he's actually going to get drafted, which I can imagine how tough that is for something you worked hard for your entire life. And then here's another quote from the same Packers Wire article from King. "I mean, I feel like the way I approach the game is always the same," said King about his play in 2023. I put in the work and I know what I'm capable of. Just because I got picked towards the end of the 7th round this year doesn't mean that's the player I am. That's just where I was slotted to be. Going to go into the NFL, my career really starts now. And he also said that he now has a, quote, permanent chip on his shoulder. And when you look at the fact that, he dropped as far as he did, the Packers clearly saw something in him to be willing to draft him in round 7. And of course, in round 7, it's not like it's that risky to take any players because, of course, there are from time to time 7th round picks who come through. It's happened with the Packers. Rasheed Walker a couple of years ago, 7th rounder, is now become one of their key starters at tackle. And then Carrington Valentine last year, cornerback, just like King, 7th rounder. And he played 694 snaps for the Packers last season. So the Packers at times, do get some quality players in the 7th round. And hopefully that's what happens with Kalen King. And I just think when you look at the fact that he did have such an elite season in 2022, if you're the Packers, you're hoping that with some coaching, with some development, maybe some mentorship in practice from a guy like Jair Alexander, maybe in a couple seasons, this guy can get back to that form because they have to see that he has that ability to play at a top-tier level. And let's say he gets back on track and plays even somewhat close to that, the Packers are going to have a crazy value here drafting in round 7. And even if he comes through a little bit and starts to, eventually play starter snaps, which who knows, that's clearly a huge payoff for a potential 7th round pick. And the one difference, if we look at Valentine from last year and Kalen King from this year, Valentine is a much more elite athlete when you look at his RAS score, relative athletic score, his 40 time. Valentine ran a 4.44 40, while Kalen King had a 6.68 RAS and ran a 4.61 40. So he's not quite as athletically gifted as a guy like Carrington Valentine. So that is sort of one area where they're different, even though they were both drafted in the 7th round. And so I think because he's shown that ability to be a first-round talent at some point in his career, the Packers are taking a chance here, hoping that maybe that can be the outcome here in Green Bay. And here's what Brian Gutekunst, Packers GM, had to say regarding this pick. This is also from Packers Wire. I think our league has a long history of guys who felt they were overlooked and used that as motivation to drive themselves, said Gutekunst about King. Hopefully that'll be the case. I didn't hear that interview. Certainly he was a guy that we expected to go higher, and as we went through it, we felt very fortunate to be able to pick him where we did. So Gutekunst sounds pretty happy with where the Packers were able to get him. And when we look at the Packers in their cornerback room, Jair Alexander, one of the starters on the outside, Keyshawn Nixon, probably a starter at nickel, now actually Javon Bullard, who was drafted in round 2, safety, also has that ability to play nickel. He played a lot of nickel in college with Georgia. And so I think that if the Packers maybe have some confidence in a guy like Evan Williams at safety or Anthony Johnson Jr. from last year at safety, and they think that Bullard is better than Nixon at nickel, and they think that they'll be better off putting Bullard at nickel and maybe one of those other safeties back there with McKinney, maybe that happens. But right now I'd say Jair, corner, outside corner, Keyshawn Nixon, slot corner, and then on the other side, either Eric Stokes or Carrington Valentine. With Stokes, it just comes down to, can he stay healthy? Can he get back to his his rookie season form? Because if he can, he could be a solid starter out there alongside Jair Alexander on the opposite outside corner. Carrington Valentine could take some steps forward coming into his 2nd season. And so for Kalen King to, push his way up to the front to become a starter, he'll have to beat out Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes. Maybe it doesn't happen year 1, but maybe with some development, he can get better and maybe get back to that form that he had back in the 2022 season. Plus, with injuries, you never know when you need someone to come through. I wouldn't have imagined that Carrington Valentine was going to play as many snaps as he did last year, and so you never know. Of course, Packers also have Corey Ballantyne, who they brought back this offseason. So the Packers have a good amount of depth at corner. They could have drafted a corner early, in my opinion. That would have made sense to potentially be that starter on the opposite side of Jair. They decided not to go with offensive lineman, safety, and linebacker, which I was completely fine with. And they finally get a cornerback in round 7 who I think has a lot of upside if he can get back to his previous form. And so I think that just when you have a player in the 7th round who at one point was seen as a first rounder, there's some chance that he gets back to even playing near that level, which I think is why I think he could be one of the steals of this draft in Green Bay here. So those are my thoughts. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. Make sure you turn on the post notifications. That way, anytime I make a video, you will get notified right away. But I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys next time.